the question of, are we actually ready for Africa's Gen Z audience? Farah, I'm going to start with you.
Great. First to go. Hello, everyone. My name is Farah, and I am the client partner for consumer business at TikTok for Sub-Saharan Africa. Just a little bit about myself. Obviously, I am not from the region, but I have just joined Team Africa the past year from the Middle East, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know the markets, to understand a little bit more about the brands, and it's truly been an education, particularly when it comes to Gen Z. And I stand, I think, firmly on the side of the industry is not quite ready. I think we've made a lot of strides in trying to appeal to Gen Z, but I think that right now there's a lot more rhetoric versus receipts. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are... I went straight in. And I think that also, it's an ongoing journey, right? Gen Z is between the ages of 13 to 28, to our former speaker's point, in many different stages of life from many different backgrounds. And brands tend to think, mass first versus those nuanced conversations. And while I've seen, a concerted effort from different brands trying to play in that spaces, I think the industry as a whole has a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes as marketeers, myself included, we are guilty of not taking our marketeer hat off and speaking the consumer's language. And I think these are the steps and the tweaks and the journey we as an industry need to do.
Thank you, Farah. Okay, right out the gates, rhetoric.
She brought up receipts. Morning, everyone. My name is Kenzie. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for WiM. I'm obviously not a Gen Z, although I feel like at heart. I think Gen Z is a mindset versus anything else. So where do I stand? First of all, I just want to say, thank God TikTok thinks we're sort of ready, because if TikTok doesn't think we're ready, then I'm not sure what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And let me tell you why I think we're generally ready. We might not be 100% today. If you think about what Mona Lisa was speaking about, right? Think about a lot of the things which Gen Z women were saying is important to them. Actually similar to what millennial women are saying. Similar to what Gen X women are saying. So I think sometimes what we get caught up with is the differences versus, actually there's a lot of similarity, right? And as you think about how your brand shows up and the marketing work that you do, you've got to take that into account. Yes, there's going to be ways in terms of how you show up, for example. So, and when I say how, I'll take TikTok as a great example, is I might not be on TikTok, right? And so to show up to me, you're not going to be able to, right? But I can find a Gen Z on TikTok, but still have the values of Nedbank come across very similarly across many different cohorts, right? From a life stage perspective, and so actually, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the differences, we forget that brands have roots, and what you should always do is ensure that that root shows up in the very same way for different people, but you show up in spaces that look different, right? Purely based on media consumption and all of those things. So, yeah, bloody hell, I think we're ready.
Great, I like that, Kensani. Moyen, do you want to?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Moya Laurentaba, and originally I'm from Nigeria. My family moved down to Lesotho first, then Lady Brand in the Free State, then Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. I got tired of traveling. And I fell in love with Cape Town, and so that is my city till now. I have a marketing background, but Home Affairs decided to kind of use my paperwork for about a year and a half. And at that time, I had to figure out what to do as somebody who was excited right out of the gate of university. And digital became my anchor. And so I became a full-time creator from 2015, where it wasn't as rich as it is right now, but it allowed me to grow with the world that we now have and see it from both sides. Kind of as millennials do a lot, we were the ones who had a world before digital, and we're in digital. And so I've been able to work with partners like YouTube and TikTok as a creator and an OG, essentially, as they would say. Training a lot of creators, but also work with EDC now. EDC is a company called EDC, Everyday Creators, Everyday Content. And they work with creators to access, essentially, money through their content. And I head up a lot of their impacts. And so we take a cohort of unemployed individuals, train them in how to create content, and then get them earning, because that was my story as well. When I couldn't work, I went to digital. It became my tool. I went on to create incredible shows digitally that went to air on South African Airways, on TV, and then went into broadcasting. And it's quite interesting to talk about the world between Gen Z and the traditional landscapes in marketing, because when I moved from digital content to TV broadcasting, I actually felt a lot of the challenges that a lot of the Gen Zs kind of feel right now, where it was an institution that had been there for a very long time. There were strong roots, and I'd come this bright-eyed, digital native, excited, with sometimes more followers than the shows that I was on. But then was still then brought into a world that really wanted to confine me based off of what they had before. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot now with Gen Z. And so I do still think we have some work to do. I guess that's why I'm on this side of the house.
Yeah.
And we're very excited for this conversation. So thank you for having me.
I like that. So it's this idea that we don't want to be squashed in by old frameworks. Okay, we'll talk about that. Amara, do you want to go next?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Amara and I lead Home Care's influencers, digital and PR. And I definitely do think we are ready. We've had over about a decade to evolve and adapt and throw out, I want to say, old tactics and really dive deep into digital first strategies and influencer-led storytelling. And for us, it's really about how do we create these experiences and really speak to the youth. And it's very nuanced, really, and everyone is so different. So I think we are definitely ready in the space that we've really brought forward how we speak and how we play into culture when it comes to brands in the space.
Great. Thanks for being here with us, Amara. Senna.
Hello, besties. My name is Senna Milezungu. I am commercial lead here at Kantar, but I think most people in this room and my colleagues know what I really do here, and that's the personality hire. I'm totally okay with that, okay? I'm totally fine with that because... I've had to reinvent and reimagine my identity a number of times through my short life. But in a span of just 4 years, I've been a commercial lawyer. I've been a writer, a researcher, a social commentator, a top charting podcaster, a content creator, and much to, this didn't pay well, much to my parents' dismay, I was a professional stay-at-home daughter for a while. But I think my experience of being able to navigate so many different trajectories is not unique because I am born from a generation where that is the norm. And that's the thing with Gen Z, right? It's the predictable unpredictability. So I think you'll hear a lot of words being thrown around. I think you have heard them already: disruptor, AI, innovation. And as we have this discussion, I really want you to sort of really hold space for the nuance and the complexity. My therapist likes to say two truths can exist at the same time. So this one day she said to me, Senna, you are the most self-aware young woman I've ever met. But in the same breath, you have the lack of impulse control against a little child. And I was like, excuse me, I do not pay you to question my bad life decisions. But anyway, I think that is Gen Z. Gen Z is full of contradiction and complexities. I mean, you can be shooting a Get Ready With Me, while also, which is something thought to be like a little bit vain and self-centered, while also caring deeply about your community and progress. You can be a what's the ka? Yeah. You can be that, right? But be so invested in pushing your craft, pushing creative arts, pushing entrepreneurship. And I think the youth in Kenya also showed us that you can be a baddie, like edges snatched, and still be at an anti-government protest, fleeing tear gas and live streaming it on TikTok. So I think that just shows us like how complex and nuanced it is. But I do think that the industry has not been able to hold space for that nuance to the level at which it is required. I do also think that Gen Zs, you've been speaking so much about us and not to us. And I think the next level is really embracing co-creation on every single level. I'm happy to see so many young people in the room.
Yes.
Ivan says me. Because I'm a firm believer in intergenerational discussions. Ivan, because I trade in my Gen Z, like I give him the Gen Z dictionary. Sometimes he'll send me to marketing conferences where I've met a lot of you incredible senior people. And I'll go there and I'm like, okay, but where are the young people at? They would benefit so much from these discussions, but also you would benefit so much from these discussions. So I think, you know, it reminds me of that song, Dala ni slindile, sisfigile. I mean, you millennials, you should know that. We're here now. We're here now, so let's get on with it. Let's co-create something. So, yeah.
Hey, and Karen. Okay, so I am a senior millennial, female, leading an iconic masculine brand in Carling Black Label. And I want to just start by saying that I believe that, just coming out of Women's Month, that the female superpower is empathy. And I learned empathy here, thank you, Ivan, in my time at Kantar. And I truly believe that to serve the needs of a new generation, you don't need to be that generation. You just need to listen. And so it is because of that that I lead Carling Black Label, an iconic masculine brand, that we lean into this idea of core audience, halo audience, okay? So our core audience as Carling Black Label is where 80% of our consumption comes from, which is the, 25 to 40-year-old male. But we believe that the halo audience, which is our legal drinking age, so 18 to kind of 20, 25, 29, that is how we're going to future-proof the brand. So I have an incredible responsibility in the fact that this brand lived before me and it will live after me. But my responsibility is to nurture it in this period of growth and to ensure that I future-proof it by keeping a clear understanding on this halo audience. And so to understand that halo audience, you need to find the connective tissue between your halo, exactly what you said, Pensani, find the connective tissue between your halo audience and your core audience. And I speak in a way that is credible for your brand. The faux pas that we keep seeing from brands is when they pivot entirely, Jaguar, when they pivot and they lose what is authentic and real about their brand, rather than using what is real and true about their brand and using that as a platform for good and using it as a platform for change. So Ivan talked about it earlier. I have the incredible blessing where my purpose and my work come together, and that is that Carling Black Label knows that we talked about gender-based violence many times, that gender-based violence starts with men. And so we, as an iconic masculine brand, have to lean into that discomfort. We don't shy away from it. We lean into the discomfort of that. And what we do find is how that's really allowing us to connect to this new audience, because we're not just saying it, we're doing it every single day. In every single top sporting fixture in South Africa, you will see no excuse messaging.
Great. I'm looking forward to delving into that one a little bit deeper. Okay, so, it's time now for the audience to get involved. So Andrea's putting up a Slido on the screen, so if you want to get your phones ready.
So if you can, excuse me, if you can scan the QR code, you guys can do it as well if you want to. There are going to be 4 questions, and then we're doing this poll right now, and then we'll do it after the debate and see if there's been any movement in the results.
Hey guys, so everyone just take a moment to snap the Slido and get into the poll.
Okay, can I get a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Are we in?
Yeah.
Okay, first question. What is the biggest commercial risk of not connecting authentically with Gen Z? Right, so we can choose from loss of long-term loyalty, declining cultural relevance, reduced competitive edge with global players, and reputational backlash. Okay. Okay, we're a bit split on the others, but it looks like everyone's sort of anchoring in on loss of long-term loyalty. So we're feeling like loyalty is the biggest risk if we're not connecting authentically with Gen Z. Okay, followed not too far behind by declining cultural relevance. All right. Okay, let's see what you guys say after the debate. The next one. Where do you believe brands are the most guilty of misreading Gen Z? Treating them as a single homogeneous group, assuming representation equals authenticity, overclaiming on purpose without delivery, over-indexing on influences without substance, and superficial use of trends and language.
All of them.
All of you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so it's superficial use of trends and language to appear Gen Z fluent, but some of us believe all of the above. Yeah, did not structure that question properly. All right, next one. What would you identify as Gen Z's greatest disruptive power in Africa's marketing landscape? Redefining brand loyalty, democratizing influence, turning activism, where'd it go? To consumer voice, and demanding faster digital transformation. All of them.
One has to break. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And this is the final one. Is purpose fatigue a real threat among Gen Z in Africa? Or is it more of a failure of execution by brands? Okay, it's failure. Brands aren't walking the talk. Okay, and then some of us think that it's a little bit of fatigue. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you for that. Tough crowd. That's not holding back. All right, but now let's get to our debate. I think the first question that I want to ask, and I think I'm going to ask the right-hand side of the panel. Do you think that brands truly understand the difference between African Gen Z and then the global average Gen Z that people seem to know?
I'm going to.
I know.
Anyone can go.
Yeah, anyone can go.
No, I don't think they do. Again, I think I see a lot of brands. It was funny when you pulled up the poll question of like, what do you think is not landing? And clearly, like, we all appreciate a good viral moment or a trend. But like, it's giving survival. It's giving like aunties in the group chat and they're not supposed to. So I think you can make the mistake of taking what's happening in the global sort of Gen Z context. And I mean, I'm going to touch on something heavily here, like the Charlie Kirk old discourse on manosphere conservatism. And I think, Mona Lisa outlined for us that we are living in a patriarchal society as it relates to women. But I just think that there's a lot of nuance there versus what's happening in America versus with African Gen Zs. So I do think it's very risky to conflate the two, and I do believe that brands can't necessarily tap into the difference at present.
And if I can just build upon that, when I think about brands and I think about the content that I've seen coming out, because being in the position that I am, I have access to a lot of content across the FMCG sector, and sometimes I can't tell the difference between brands. The content looks so exactly the same jargon. the same sort of look and feel, you know, building on those trends and building on the, you know, Gen Z jargon, that I can't tell, you know, the difference between the beauty brands versus, you know, the F&B brands sometimes. And if everything starts to look the same, they're definitely not able to tell, I think, the nuances of the local audience and what they're looking for in that brand communication.
Yeah, I think also, obviously internationally there's a lot more information. There's a lot more research, there's a lot more stats. Africa is slightly different, which is why it's so amazing that we have partners that really push the research on this continent. But sometimes the world we live in is between Cape Town and Joburg. And as somebody who's lived in the other parts of South Africa, how much are we actually taking the time to listen to the majority of this country? And that's not going to be with a quick Google search. That's going to be focus groups. That's going to be sitting with them. We've spoken about how listening to Gen Z isn't happening as much. And I think that's why we see what we see, where there's a disconnect, because you actually have to listen to the consumer. And in Africa, there's extra steps to make that happen.
Kensani, do you have a response? What comes to mind when you hear some of what's being said about understanding South African Gen Zs?
Yeah, so I think we talk about Gen Z having grown up as digital natives, right? So maybe the first, I guess what I would say, just functional sort of difference is digital natives in Africa is very different to the rest of the world. Why? Because just fundamentally access to network and all of that is really different. So when you then think about how do you speak to a Gen Z on the continent, you can't speak to them thinking about 5G data, like all of you just got to have a different mindset, because if you don't, you're actually not going to reach them, and you're talking to yourself, by the way, right? Yeah. So whenever you do content, you've also got to think about how is the content reaching on the other side, right? I think the second thing is, and it's got to do, I guess, also just with Africa. If you're going to think about Gen Z, so I mean, what really surprised me in the research was the fact that they're thinking about starting families. I was like, whoa, wait, like, don't do that. But, you know, I think for me, I think it's an African thing, right, where we are really much more family oriented than perhaps the West is. So when you think about how you show up as a brand, you've got to take that nuance into account, because no matter how you put it, like Gen Z in the rest of the world is definitely much more selfish. So whilst they're selfish, they're also very clear about community and all of that. So you've always got to take that nuance into play. I also think, by the way, that even in that difference, because I always, as brands, so I loved the answer to the question around where do we go wrong, which is I try to be cool. One of the conversations I'm always having with our agencies and our marketing team, if you want to future-proof your bank, you've got to make sure that you start getting young people into your brand. Because really, I mean, how many of you have changed a bank account in the last 5 years? It's hard. It's really hard. You can complain. I hate them. I hate them. And you literally stay. So we just want you there. Like, as a 5-year-old, the minute you're in, we're like, yes. Because it's very hard to leave us, right? So when we think about, to future-proof the bank, we've got to get you, at that young age. And fortunately, we can. So we do things, for example, like Roblox. We've got a game where you can create a restaurant, and we teach you how to learn how to manage money. So again, I go back to brands have roots. Our brand is about how do we use our financial expertise to make a positive impact on society. And part of that is to teach you that money well managed can make a real difference in your life. Now, I wouldn't, if I'm targeting Mivuyo, I'm not going to build a game on Roblox and be an entrepreneur, but they are on Roblox. So we're going where they are, and we're talking to them in the way that makes sense to them. And in all of that, they learn how to manage money, they make entrepreneurial decisions and all of that. And obviously, there's a marketing play digitally, from that space. And then we hook you in and we move with you, and you never leave us. Very hard. But anyway, the reason I say that is, even with all of some of the differences that I've mentioned, I take a brand like Dove. It's interesting to me how Dove is doing so well with its Real Beauty campaign, which is a campaign that's over 25 years old. So what we should never lose sight of as marketers, just because we're trying to appeal to these younger audiences, and yes, there's nuances that we should lean into, but there's human truths that are enduring. And in that endurance, we must always make sure that we show up like that. So I just love the fact that the way Dove is doing Real Beauty now, it's very different from how we did it, but it's still Real Beauty. It's taken into account the context of what Gen Zs look like and showing up in a different way. So you've always got to take, so don't try to be, so I always say to my marketing agents, don't try to be too cool, they think I'll be cool. Yes. Don't be like, yeah, I don't know, probably you always don't know how to be cool. Like, I don't know. But, and that's the point, if you try to be something that you're not, they see right through. So you've got to be authentic.
Karen, you said something earlier about you're a custodian of the brand, and the brand has to be who the brand is. So what would your response be against that? What would your response be in this case?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with that answer, by the way, around brands superficially just tapping into trends. And the one thing I do believe, though, is that we were talking about other generations, and trust me, when those marketeers were going through those generational changes, they were in the same discomfort that we are. We have a beautiful gift. Social media and the world of digital is a beautiful gift for marketeers if you're prepared to listen and not just take it at face value. So systematically, what we do, literally 9:30 every single morning, we get together with our social listening team and we hear what's happening on the ground, what are the trends, and then we decide around the room, do we have a right to play here? Just because it's topical doesn't mean it's for us to talk about. And I think that's where it goes wrong. It's, this dance challenge. Okay, but if we're not a brand that's about joy or about dancing, why would we be promoting that? So that's, for me, I think where a lot of marketeers get it wrong, is that they just go, this is trending, therefore I need it for earned media, and you're just going to hop on it, not because it's really connected to either a passion point that your brand credibly can talk about, or an insight that's true for your brand to have any voice on.
Got you. Okay. I want to change the question up now. So, Amara, I'm going to come to you. So we know that Gen Z is fluent in a lot of topics that previous generations maybe weren't as fluent or comfortable with. So things like gender fluidity, gender-based violence, mental health, all of those previously considered really tough conversations. Do you think that brands are getting brave enough to talk about those topics? I know Carling is, Karen, but other brands, do you think brands in general, speaking about things that are really tough to talk about, are brands sort of taking those courageous leaps to have those conversations?
I think there is move towards it because, again, Gen Z are such an unapologetic audience and they know what they stand for. And if brands have values and those values speak to certain things in society, they need to take that step. Again, we can't say something and not walk the talk, literally. So I think there's a step towards that. I don't think we're there yet. I think Dove is a great example. It's iconically stood for something for so long. And right now, if brands don't do that, it's kind of a passport factor. If you don't have a strong purpose, you don't have a strong value, Gen Z is not really going to resonate with you because they don't really buy into the functional benefits of your product. They buy into everything else around that.
Okay. Can I just come in here? I mean, I think what's the whole thing around, I guess, what they care about, right, is again, going back to authentically being like your brand. So let's take GBV. So one of the things that I always get asked, what are you as the bank doing about GBV? And I'm like, what do we do? Like, that just makes no sense. But however, we did research with people against women abuse, and what we found was that in 99% of GBV cases, financial abuse is actually a big issue. Then we went, now Nedbank can show up. So I think it's so easy to get caught up in these big topics that are really important to Gen Zs. But if you do it in a way, like if we had gone out and did no excuse, it was like, what are you on about and stuff. But when we put money warnings on, and I don't know if anyone saw them, but on our outdoor, so every outdoor for Nedbank, so alcohol warnings, we took it, I used to work in alcohol, so anyway, we took it from alcohol, where on our billboards and our communication during that period, we had money can be used to abuse women. For a bank to do that. But that's us saying that if we're going back to our purpose, which I've already told you, but also showing up in an authentic manner for something that Gen Zs care about. So you've always got to constantly connect the dots and make sure that you're not jumping on the bandwagon. So we probably people felt like we were quiet for 5, 6 years, but we hadn't cracked it, and we'd rather be quiet than go and say something that actually just doesn't land.
Can I also interject here, Ren? Because I think it's important every time we do speak about Gen Z and being value-driven and purpose-driven, you get people who are like, okay, well, this doesn't really do anything for our bottom line. This is like, you know, you woke or something. And Ivan, you know, I'm going to use it. I'm going to say, if you don't do it for the love, do it for the money. So we've done some research at Kantar, and it shows on a generational level that Gen Zs are being influenced on their part to purchase, and in their purchasing decisions, they're like twice more influenced than like a Gen X or a Boomer to actually put money behind the brands that they believe represent their values from an inclusion and diversity perspective. Like, and that's also important to note, going back to Kentani's point, not everybody can play in everywhere. What you have to look for is like, what does my brand stand for? I've used Carling in so many different case study examples, and it's like it would be it's like social sustainability. It can be environmental sustainability, and also we have research to show that is really backed up. Like those values do influence purchasing decisions. So guys, if you're carrying on being like the trends matter, this doesn't really matter, purpose doesn't really matter, you're completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Can I also just quickly add to it? I think, you know, with Gen Z, a lot of people saw the word authenticity, and also as a creator, I'm tired of that word because you don't need to say it; it's evident. And so a lot of people say it so that they can come across as it, but I don't need you to. If you're consistent, Dove's consistent. One of my favorite brands, consistent. And so the truth of the matter is, Gen Zs, because they are such digital natives, they see, they watch. It's not really in the times that are great. It's in the times that the world is having real conversations. Where are you? Because I don't know if you have those friends who just never stand for anything. You're not trustworthy because you don't have. There has to be something in this world that you want to advocate for. Granted, you might be slow to that response to craft it and make sure that it's great. But if you don't really stand for anything, you're also suspicious. Like, I'm also looking like, what is it? Because you could be here today, here tomorrow, and as a consumer, I can't trust your word. And I think that's what's happening. We're seeing creators and we're seeing consumers rather than Gen Z, but I mean, I think it's across the board where life is real on this continent. And if you're not able to have some say in what's happening, then what value do you really stand for? Because then your value is money. And then if that's what it is, then be consistent with it. Then we're fine with that. Then, okay, this is not a brand that we're necessarily going to come to for values. They're about their money, and that's it. And then even that becomes more real because you're true to that. And so I think that's what's happening now, whether it's the brands flip-flopping or the content is looking the same across the board. And, you know, as creators, sometimes we see when brands choose certain creators, like, oh, that's an interesting choice. Because it might not be the easiest like certain people that might not be the easiest to work with or whatever the case is, but if the value is there and that person truly connects with it, we understand it because it's consistent. And that's the thing. If it's consistent from 10 years ago, 20 years ago to today, the messaging can be different, but then it shows that you are true to that value, you are true to that messaging, therefore I can be true to you.
So Moyen, I wanna sort of shift the conversation very slightly now to bringing Gen Z in at the table when we're creating, right? So when we're creating content, when we're creating innovation. So Farah, from a TikTok perspective, have you seen evidence of brands bringing Gen Z in? Do you think it's enough? Or do you think that you can still see that there was no young person here?
I mean, that's a great question. And it really depends on the industry. It really depends on the organization. It really depends on the brand. So I've worked with some brands that have actually opened up and hired, you know, Gen Z people right out of college to do their social media for them. So they've actually created those roles for Gen Z to be able to create content that resonates, to build those value propositions that also resonate. And on the flip side, I've also seen brands that, you know, have genuinely good values, but the ability to execute and communicate those values is still not there. And I can there's definitely a difference, especially I would say on TikTok. I know you hate the word, but where authenticity is key in the way that you show up and in the way that you want your content.
Yeah.
There's a stark difference, and to your points as well, people can tell right off the bat. They can really see, okay, this is just pure, recycled brand content from the global team versus this was created for, a Gen Z female audience that lives in South Africa, for example. So there's a stark difference for sure.
I just wanted to say, after this panel, we're going to have some Q&A. So please, I don't know, you should have the link on your phone, but just put your questions in there and then we'll put them to the panelists afterwards.
I'm just touching that because through EDC, a lot of my work besides creating, because I was such an early adopter, was in training a lot of creators. And so I remember the first time I did the training with TikTok and I was chatting to them and I was like, okay, I'm going to send you a link on Instagram. And the chat was, guys, I'm not on Instagram. I'm just on TikTok. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, this was in 2021. And maybe the millennial in me was like, Facebook was what I wanted. And so I'm in rooms often with brands, and when they have their campaigns, I think sometimes brands aren't as knowledgeable about the value. They're more knowledgeable about the look of it. And so then when the value isn't understood, you get so focused on the look of it. And then that's where the disconnect is. Because if the value is financial understanding, that can take shape so many different ways. As someone who grew up across the spectrum of this continent, like the way I can talk about financial independence, financial knowledge, can look very different, but the core is that I understand the value. And I think what happens sometimes with brands is that they're looking for the same feel, the look and feel, instead of the same value. The value has to be, because the way a girl in the Eastern Cape talks about financial independence is very different from me living in Cape Town, very different from someone in the Free State in Bloom. And so do I as a brand understand the value so well that if it shows up in different ways of the rainbow, it's still there, and then I'm confident to put it across. Because I think sometimes brands are also very worried about getting cancelled, and then the stats and the research and the background checks and it's a lot.
So Moyen, I just wanna jump that across to that side of the panel now, and I wanna understand: are you guys in your in your boardrooms, are you seeing the impact of bringing in more Gen Z into the creative process, not only for activation and communication, but also innovation? Is it happening? Is it happening enough? And what's been the impact of that?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think where brands get it wrong. So I've been working in influencer marketing for 10 years. Previously, we used to have a brief, and this is when millennials were blogging and Instagram was the thing. You'd give a brief to a creator. They'd execute the brief. I think those days are long gone. We can't be precious about like very structured and tailored messaging and all these things. And where brands are getting it right is bringing the creators in, understanding truly who they are. Firstly, do our values align? Is this creator the right creator for the brand, for the campaign, etc.? And co-creating. So one campaign that phenomenally did so well this year was we brought the creators in, we co-created the whole campaign together. And these are people, again, we've signed contracts with them, they're not like Unilever-based creators for any means. But the execution of the work, because they believed in what they were doing and what the brand was saying, I didn't have to physically write the brief and give it to them and say, go do this. So that's where the beauty lies. And I think that is the evolution of where content creation has moved and influencer marketing has moved.
Shout out to Drop the Bars, by the way. I just wrote a piece about it. If you don't know the ad, the campaign, really great co-creation piece.
Karen, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think it all stems around like a really clear insight, and I think it very much connects to the research that you were saying, and it's an insight that we talk about all the time, and it's when I have a voice, I am empowered. And so the most important thing that we as brands can do is empower that voice in a really credible way. And so, like, if I think about what Carling Black Label, for example, does in soccer, we hand the power quite literally over to the fans because it's their voice that matters. And we're the ones that have to fight with the media and the soccer journos and all the people that are giving us, but why is it not being done like this? Well, it's being done in service of the fans. It's been done in service of this generation of people that genuinely believe they can do better themselves, and we give them that opportunity. So for us, it's always been, and that's actually kind of 13 years of Carling Black Label, it's always been about handing that power over to the people that matter most.
Yeah, I think on co-creation, there's definitely a spectrum of how far you can take it. We're obviously a bank, we're regulators. So there's stuff you can do, and there's that, right? There's stuff that we do with content creators that we allow them to play with a little bit more than we'd normally do. Still not probably at the level that I think many other brands can do. But I think what we've really enjoyed learning is the FinTalk space on TikTok. So what we learned really quickly is we went on TikTok, we did our own things, no one was watching. We realized there was a whole world. People were actually getting financial advice more from the FinTalkers than from banks or financial advice. So we then said, oh, well, then maybe we go with them and stuff. So it's still a space that I think we really want to build more on. I think there's another layer here, which is something that when we tried it last year, it just ended up becoming so fascinating. So it was at the Nedbank Cup final last year. We got TT Tabiso, who's a sports commentator, and he commentated on the match, reading people's tweets. So I think where we've got to take co-creation is like, you're not sitting in a room with, you've given someone a brief or you've told them. It's actually, I think what AI, what social media has done is actually allowed us to think about co-creation in such a different way. But I still think we're here. Like most brands, we're thinking here. But actually, I think there's a leap that can get us into much more, where even if I'm not a creator, or I'm not a content creator, I can still feel like I was part of that. Like I created it and stuff. So I would challenge brands to do more of that.
Yeah. Senna, what do you think it will take for brands to be able to make that leap? Right, we're here when it comes to co-creation. What do you think it will really take for us to do it courageously?
Sure. It's so crazy because we spoke to South African consumers and we asked them, do you think that brands are doing enough to take a stand in the issues that you believe in? And over, like 1 in 4 said, no, they don't. So, I mean, we sometimes show this to our clients and we're like, see, there's room for you. Consumers want you to take a stand. It's beneficial, and still I'm going to be cancelled. And I think from having a social impact or me, myself, being a creator that really comments socially on social issues such as race, I've had conversations with some marketers and they're like, I totally can back what you're doing on a personal level, but it's too risky for my brand, which is always very tricky. So in terms of what it takes, I mean, the data's there. If you perhaps a little bit more testing is what you'd like. I'm not just promoting Kataya, but you should test your creative and you should test your innovation. But I think at the end of the day, I think what I love about marketing, having like pivoted from other different careers, is guys, if you can't, no other industry is moving the needle. Like, if you guys can't do it, then everybody else is really screwed. So if you can't be bold and take those risks, then it's not looking good for everyone else. So I think it is probably just, it's a reinvigorating ourselves as marketing professionals. I think it's listening to consumers and then just being a little bit more brave, which I know sounds simplistic given all the budgeting cuts that most of you in this room face, how turbulent everything is and how divisive consumers and fragmented media landscapes can be at the moment. So it's difficult to know where you're speaking to the consumer, but a little bit more bravery.
Okay, we're going to go to Karen, and then we're going to go to Moyen, and then we're going to change the question.
I think you are completely right around the bravery thing, and something we've done organizationally to assist with that, right? Because you're right, marketing should be where we're pushing. It should be where we're being a little bit more brave. But the most important thing is we can push. And then what we've created in SAB, which really helps me sleep at night, is we have something called The Collective, which is a voice of diversity of thought. We have media people on that panel. We have people from different areas in South Africa. We have very outspoken Gen Z people on that panel. And before we go live with a campaign or when we're in the creation, we use it as a check step, so that it's to embolden us to be brave, right? And sometimes it's been great. Sometimes we've caught things that I genuinely didn't see the bad side of, and they're like, no, you need to tweak it this way. Obviously, we're also super regulated, so there's a code that needs to be upheld. But more than that, it becomes a check step to embolden us. So we get to do the crazy creative and push it and be brave, and they can pull us back if necessary.
Great. William.
I think something the brands can do, and it can be something you do within, or you partner with, for example, with EDC, we do this a lot, is training, equipping, because Gen Z, I know we speak about them, but they're still pretty young. Like, and sometimes I feel like people talk about Gen Z that they'll kill your world, but like they're also at home, and like they still need to be raised and trained, and they're still so young. And so, like was said, when you're bringing them in at 5 years old, because you know that they'll stay with that life forever, take the time to, I think we've spoken about that today, like to listen to them, yes. But at EDC, we do a really great job of bringing the brand in and the creator in to then train them, to equip them. So if that's in the value, so it's so ingrained because it's true to them and it's true to you, then the output is more authentic and it's more consistent. But that they understand in how they can take those same value tools to their world and to their community. Because essentially that's what we're talking about, is like, how do we get content there? How do we get Gen Z communicators, consumers in? It's that training of that value system, helping them, guide them in the effective ways to communicate that. Because as outspoken as Gen Zers are, we've learned today, and I've seen it time and time again, that confidence is still something that they struggle with. And so they know that they know, but how do I put that into practice so that I don't diminish my future, but I stand on what is important to me? And so they're still young. Still need to evolve them.
They're still young. Farah, I want to ask you the next question. Purpose marketing on TikTok. What is some of, like, can you think of any examples that were either really good, where purpose marketing was targeted at Gen Z and really hit the mark, or one that was really bad and it missed the mark? Does anything come to mind?
That's a great question, and you'd be surprised by how little purpose marketing actually runs, at least within the sphere that I look at.
Okay.
I think what I've seen primarily is mass marketing attached to maybe a cause. And from what I've seen there is that doesn't really resonate, you know? I think to my earlier point, what we've seen is that a lot of the companies that we work with, particularly in the CPG space, do have really great platforms that they stand on and that they provide a lot of work and funds and helping for, such as, you know, domestic violence or offering women shelters and stuff like that. But it's not really coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
And I would say 99.9% of all campaigns that I've ever seen in my 5 years at TikTok, regardless of the region.
Yeah.
So really, top of mind, I can't think of a brand that has really stood out in that space or who has done really well in that space. I don't know if you guys have anything top of mind that really spoke to you, but genuinely, like, you got me on a blank. Yeah.
Tena?
Yeah, when I wrote the Cancer Diva report, which is one of the largest consumer LGBTQ studies that we do as part of our Pride ERG here, I intentionally did not include any case study examples because simply I couldn't find them, or they were cool. Where I am seeing more purpose-based marketing or people doing really cool spaces are small entrepreneurs. I'm actually looking at Degani, who is a digital media strategist, and she does more SME and social impact. So I see more smaller grassroots-based organizations being really cool with that. I mean, Women for Change is, despite how, you know, viral and combative things can get when they do show up on TikTok, I quite appreciate it. It's emotive, and it does get you to stop and not scroll. But in terms of big brands, not really. And that's a bit sad.
Might be the only one that does it well.
Yes.
It's a Nike or Nike. I still haven't figured it out. But I mean, I think they in terms of showcasing their platform for inclusivity and support for women are the ones that have done it really well. And just in between the conversations, with the different partners that I work with, they all have these amazing platforms. But again, it comes out to, are they communicating it well? Are they communicating it in the right way?
I think, can we just talk about purpose a little bit? Because maybe, I guess it's how you look at purpose. So the way we look at purpose and the way we measure it as a bank is we measure it using the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 SDGs. And when people think about sustainability, they think about green, and it's not. If you look at the SDGs, they've got things like female equality. They've got things like zero hunger, and energy and all of that. But it's actually, and if you think about the SDG goals, if you take a step back on them, they're consumer needs. And when you fulfill a need of how do I reduce hunger, you're going to have to come up with something to do that. And if it's a real need, someone's going to buy it this way, so you're going to make money. So the point around, if it's not about care, it's about money, right? Like, I actually think it's the entire thing. You can make money. What has been interesting for us on the purpose bit, so again, we're known as the Green Bank, right? Environment and all of that. And the thing that was I'm glad for me, was something I learned, was we've got a platform called YouthX. Now, what YouthX is allowing young people to be able to support each other in achieving their dreams, whatever those dreams look like. And we've got different things that happen within that. But one of the things we do is you're able to submit a business idea. And in that business idea, we judge it and we give you money to be able to go do that business. We've done this for 5 years. In the last 3 years, the winners have been an idea in the sustainability world. So one winner was a young man who developed an app where people can thrift. I don't know what the fuck thrifting is. Like, but here's the thing, thrifting is SDG 12, which is responsible production and consumption. It's literally right in the middle of that SDG. But people will say young people don't care, or Gen Z don't care about sustainability. They do. How they care about looks very different, and how they show up in it looks very different from how I just recycle, right? Like, I'm not trying to go buy vintage clothes. I'm not trying to do that. But it was amazing. The one young man, it was a woman, sorry, her idea is basically solar powered batteries, right, for charging cell phones, but it's not like big ones, and it's got a whole thing about how, and it's, for me, I'm like, no, in fact, if I look at the ideas that have come into play, let's say we've gotten 100 ideas, probably about 60 of them have got something to do with sustainability. So I think where we as marketers, we've got to stop looking at the world in our lens and saying, young people don't care about the environment. Because here's the fact, so I go back to the question around what's the difference between Gen Zs in Africa versus the rest of the world. At the end of the day, Tsepo in Soweto is worried about putting food on his table. Absolutely. He doesn't care about the sun, and he's worried about putting food on the table. However, Tsepo from Soweto can worry about that, but he can also worry about other things. And I think it's this one lens that we look at Tsepo without realizing that Tsepo actually is multifaceted, right? There's many things he can care about. And I think for me, what I would say is, how do you take, and for me, authentic is actually it's my best word ever. I absolutely, and no one can tell me what it's my word. I think Shensi or But for me, it's about authentically showing up to Tsepo in the context of sustainability in a way that makes sense to him and makes sense for your brand. Because if we had moved away and thought, they don't care about sustainability, we wouldn't have these amazing ideas from young people. I mean, WiM, who did the thrifting app, is 22 years old. And literally I was like, can I invest in your app? You know what I mean? Because I think and it's growing and he's doing incredibly well. So for me, on purpose, you've got to find the lens that makes sense. Whereas when we speak to corporate South Africa on purpose, which is like we talk about the energy transition. So it's a very different conversation that we have there versus when we have with Gen Zs.
Got you. Okay. That's a challenge though, right? Thinking about someone who has bottom of Maslow's hierarchy concerns, but also really worried about the grander sort of impact around the world. And like, I think that's something that's quite different to previous generations. And so when you're speaking to them, how and when, and like, how do you decide what the right balance is? Amara, I'm going to put this one to you.
So I think it's about truly understanding and listening to them, because I think we gone are the days where we can still bucket people into this specific like cohorts. When we look at like TikTok specifically, there's a big portion of creators that are in a lower affluent area, creating content, and and are really, I want to say, aspirational. Like, they have basic phones, they're creating these pieces of content. So when we're developing products also, we're looking at this wide array of consumers. What is it that is really their consumer pain points, and how can we really develop for them? And that purpose element, to your point, goes beyond just the basic like corporate purposes. It goes beyond that. It goes really diving into them specifically, into the Maslow's hierarchy, and what do they actually care about, and what will make a difference to them in their lives.
Okay. All right. So it's about surfacing, no matter where it sits on the hierarchy, if it's one of the things that pops up, it's something that we should be talking about. Karen, go for it.
Just to add to that, I think I always talk about, in Africa, we have the privilege of problems, in the fact that as brands, we have the ability to solve some of these problems, right? And really assist with that. And I do think that is a massive privilege. If I think about working in a developed market, which I've never done, but I think it must be really tricky, because the types of problems you're trying to solve are not ones that credibly Black brands can play a role in. Yeah. But I think it's exactly to your point around not thinking that, and I mean, it's today, to be completely honest, we've been talking about Gen Z as one thing and one person and one segment, right? And I think it's exactly that. It's about seeking to understand the different layers, and then understanding what are real pain points that your brand can credibly solve. Access becomes a really important one, that maybe your brand can play a role credibly, but it's about being very clear on that and not trying to fix everything with your brand.
All right. So it's about knowing who you are as a brand first before you try and speak to another whole generation. Okay. Andrea, I'm just going to check with you if there are any questions that have come in.
Yeah, we've got a few. Let me just pick them up now. Okay, one, how can we heal from sectors that aren't necessarily consumer-based or brand-orientated? Let me try another one. To what extent is some of the generalizations for Gen Z driven by global marketing heads driving some of the decisions at the regional level?
Not much, to be honest. I think these days, we still Unilever's majority global brands, and we still directly dock into global, but we have a lot of power in the last 10 years, I want to say, to develop for Africa. And those nuances are what's making us better. To your point, like the Drop Your Bar campaign was inspired by social listening. We heard and saw what consumers were doing with our Sunlight Bar product. I mean, it was not created to use on your eyebrows and gel your edges. Like, that is not what the intent was. But that is how Gen Z are using the product. So we listened, and we developed a campaign around saying, cool, this is how you guys want to talk about a product. We will assist you. We will show you that it can be. And they led the campaign, essentially. So yeah, we have a lot more freedom to develop for local.
I've just one more question, which I thought might be quite good. How can these conversations be more impactful when the panel... Sorry, that was... and I'll come back to that question. The question was, what lessons can brands learn from Gen Z in preparation for the next wave of disruptors, Gen Alpha? I'm looking at you, Senna. Vanessa.
And am I really going first? So
no. I mean, whoever.
That is a tough one.
Okay, wait, read the question again.
So, what lessons can brands learn from Gen Z in preparation for the next wave of disruptors, Gen Alpha?
I think I have a point of view a little bit. I think what we've seen with Gen Zs, and I think everybody's alluded to the larger than life personalities, tell it as it is. I'm coming in, I'm going to own the space, even though we're totally faking it. I think one thing that stands out is the personal brand element of Gen Zs is creeping up in so many different ways, from the rise of content creation to what they aspire to be in the future. So I think that with Gen Alpha coming up, I do think that they're going to want even more agency and autonomy over what they do in their career and their workplaces. I think they want to be the brand. So I think we can look forward to more main character energy from the next generations. Yeah, so just keep that in mind for brands. What are you doing for the person?
I'd also say maybe the key takeaway for then the next generation is to listen.
Yeah.
I think that's the point, right? Because yes, the next generation might come across way more, loud and proud and all of the great things, but they might not also. There might be twists and turns to them because of what they've lived through and what they've seen. And so I think more than anything, it's listening, bringing them into the room, listening, removing the preconceived notions and putting them to the side, remembering that, yes, we live in a global world that they have access to, but we also have local issues. And so I don't know if we can do greater than actually bringing them in, listening to them, finding them, and then with shared values moving forward.
Yeah, because I think having been in the industry for about 15 years, I'm seeing the way that we as marketeers are dealing with Gen Z is the same mistakes that we made, back in the day when we were young millennials, just clumping us all into one segment, assuming a lot of personality traits or interest traits, and then just using that as a paintbrush. So to your point, I think, yes, we need as an industry to really listen, to build on those values as you guys were all talking about. And then somebody also mentioned finding those insights that live across generations and that are true across different generations for women in particular. I think those are the things, and if we get it right now, then there's so much that we can do, I think, as an industry moving into the next wave of consumers to come.
Maybe just one thing that I want to add, and I think all that you've said really makes sense, but maybe the one gift we have as marketers right now is digital data and tech, right? It's a true gift because one, it's able to prove a return on marketing investment that marketing has never been able to prove before. So if I think about attribution of, I've played a TV ad, but I need to sell credit cards here. I can't give them the TV ad, right? Right now I'm in a world where actually the attribution is incredibly clear. So I think what that has done for us is it's allowed us to the point of not generalizing, get to a segment of one. And that segment of one, you might not know that it is Andrea, but and we're banks, right? So we generally know a lot about you and how you shop and all of that. So we can create personas where we're able to target you with the right offer at the right time. So for me, the use of enduring brands from an insight perspective, ensuring that that shows up to the new generation in whatever way that's important for that new generation, but making sure that as we deliver content, we're able to do it in a much more hyper-personalized manner, actually puts us as marketers in a much better position than we used to. If I look at my business plan now, going forward, it's got less creative and more data and technology. And when we think about it in that sense, we won't be scared about what Gen Alpha looks like because we'll know that we're able to reach them as a target of one, but based on who our brand really is and the enduring insights that come, I think, from every brand.
I think the one thing that I also want to add on Gen Alpha is that, a lot of them are going through high school and school now, and they are all AI native. And or will become AI native. And that means that they will get into the working world in 7 years' time. And they will expect for their world to be sentient, right? So I want to talk to that chair and make sure that it makes me comfortable. I want to talk to my kitchen to make sure it's getting ready what I need. So by the time I get from the bedroom to the kitchen, my coffee's ready. I want to be able to interact with my world in the most seamless way. And tech, like Kantani said, like tech has to be kind of at the base of that. Tech is not the product, it is the way we deliver the solution. And we have to be ready for that. I like to also tell like my Gen Z colleagues, yeah, Gen Alpha is coming, it's 6 years time, and they're your problem. Because you can't give them 5 steps on how to save something as a PDF. They want to talk to their computer and say, save this and do it the way it needs to be done. And you have to understand, and we have to understand that this is how they'll be interacting with their world. And so that means from now we need to start working on how do we remove even the frictions that we got used to. There are frictions in our lives that we think are just par for the course, not par for the course for this generation. So I think, like many of the panelists says, it just comes with, we have to understand them in a deep, deep way, and we're going to find out that there are some things that they're not going to be willing to put up with. And tech will help us solve those problems.
Do we want to put it to the audience? Just a couple of questions. Has anyone got a couple of questions, or a couple of people who want to put their hands up to ask the panel directly? From Gillian.
So actually building on the point that you just made about Gen Alphas and AI, my question for the panel, even now, a lot of search and a lot of content is being created by AI. And so for me, while you can get hyper-personalized, at the same time, you risk losing some of your voice and who you are, because now even searches, when you do your search, it's the answers that you get are what AI is choosing to pull based on different things. So I'm just wondering, as brands of both large companies and up and coming, how are you guys kind of planning towards or currently considering AI as part of your brand delivery, brand promise, and the way you engage with customers?
That's at the show. I think it's not something that's coming, it's already there, right? And I don't say it's, when you talk about brand trust and like equity and all of that versus the hyper-personalized, I think it's and. And the and is what makes you more powerful actually, because you're building both. But when we talk about AI quite specifically, I think there's the bit which probably feels obvious, which is like, how does it help you from a creative perspective? And that bit, by the way, some of the challenges we've had is that it's quite Eurocentric. So one of the challenges that I was at the Institute for Real Growth in June at Canon, we were speaking about what are some of the challenges on AI. And for me, it's this, the number of voices that go into AI have to be broad, diverse, and all of that. Otherwise, what we're going to get is a white man's view of the world, and that's not acceptable, right? So we've got to make sure that what AI spits out shows a much more diverse from a creative perspective. I think that's the first bit. The second bit is obviously AI is helping us on targeting incredibly. If I look at our efficiencies and all of that, it's just gone to completely next level. From what we used to, how much it used to cost us to get someone to open a home loan versus now it's like chalk and cheese, and it's, you know, but then there's uses of AI that for me are becoming much more interesting. So I'm always going to talk about it from a bank perspective. At the fundamental core of a bank is risk management, and the risk management bit is, will Dale pay us back? That is the fundamental question a bank asks. The way we look at our tools, right, how we risk rate people right now is very traditional way of understanding how money moves and blah, 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 because that's how banks are, that we just use what we know. Actually, what AI does for us is it helps us understand how money moves in ways that as banks, we're just like, fuck, there's money there, right? Like, and it's so powerful because, by the way, it doesn't just help us in growing value. It helps people who are not in the financial industry to actually come into the financial industry, because all of a sudden, the tools that we're using to credit risk people are so different. The data and the information that we're using in our risk models is so different. Now, it's very scary for banks because we want to be 100% sure that you're going to pay us. But we're learning that we can't, AI is actually giving us data and allowing more people to come into, there's 61 million South Africans, about 40 million of them are in the banking system. Even that 40 million, if you look at how much they spend, it's so low, right? Like, so actually, this is an opportunity to get more people into the banking system using AI information that a human brain cannot process, cannot put into a model. whereas AI can. So I think it's fundamental, but it's a tool. It's but just a tool. You still have human beings, even on a creative perspective, by the way, who still have to make calls on it. Maybe the last thing I'll say on, like, one of the reasons I love judging awards and all of that is I get to learn so much from what other brands are doing. So there's a bank in South America that uses gaming to risk rate you. So depending on how aggressive you are in the game, decisions you make in the game. And as a young person, because you don't have a credit record, right? So you don't have a track record from a credit perspective, right, as a young person. So what this bank does is they take all your gaming information, then they go, yeah, I mean, let's give it 1,000 rand. She probably shares like, or no money at all, or 5,000 rand, right? Like, which I think is incredible. So those are the tools that I think as brands, you've got to like learn how to use them. I did take that to the chief risk officer at Nedbank. They were like, are you kidding me? But I'm hoping that the more and more as brands do these type of things and they become the norm, that we will actually challenge ourselves to start thinking about all of these things in a very different way than the way we think about them now.
What was the bank called?
I'll tell you, I don't remember. Yeah. I did really well at Creative Business Transformation, Cannes Lions 2023. Yeah. 2023, they're using gaming.
Okay, any other questions, guys? Burning questions? Okay.
Okay, so my question is to the Gen Z side. So I just wanted to know if you had to choose between a brand that is highly creative but not consistent versus a one that is consistent but not really creative. What do you think Gen Zs would respect more? Because, you know, brands are actually...
Sorry, can you just ask it again?
Sorry, can I ask it again? Yes. Oh, okay. Let me stand up.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Kopano, and I'm with Teleshow Investment Holdings. So I just wanted to find out from you guys if there was a brand that was highly creative but not consistent, right? Versus a brand that is very consistent but not really creative. What do you think Gen Zs are most, to give respect to between the two? Because I mean, I think brands are looking, to house both like creativity and consistency, but I think there's always a trade-off between the two. So
I think so. Oh no,
Do you go ahead.
I think that's so nuanced, and I think it's a really interesting question because I think it's also very, I would say, industry dependent as well. Because if I look at like FMCG versus luxury, shout out to Unilever, Scrub Daddies, amazing creative presence on TikTok is something that we talk about all the time and refer to all the time. And from a global account, drove worldwide sales based on creativity, which I think is something that I think a lot of us, regardless of generation, really lean into and enjoy and relate to. But if you look at, another industry, which is luxury, I think consistency in that brand image and messaging is never going to change. But I think what, sorry to lump them again, but Gen Z is going to look at is the values, right? Mm-hmm. Where do those diamonds come from? Where do you get the gold? How is it brought to life? What is the craftsmanship? So I really, really think it's much more nuanced. I don't think there is at least in my view, a preference between the two. Because I think ultimately values will trump all. But having said that, I think creativity plays a big part in how you resonate with the brand.
I think I'll just add on to that. Like from an insights perspective, again, it depends. Like it depends on what is driving equity in that category, right? But I think that, what are you consistent on? Are you consistent on your experience, your products? There's so many different ways in which a brand can show up and not necessarily too creative. And I think, again, it varies depending on what category you're in. But I can think of a brand who I think are just like so consistent. Like Nike are so consistent with their creative, all great campaigns. Yet, you know, I was using them as a case study for another food brand last year. And one of the gentlemen on the leadership team was like, yeah, but then how do you explain like the bad sales over the past year or their decline in market share? And I was like, it's like, I'm just a girl. But I think the point of that is there's so much more going on at Nike. There was, you know, it's very competitive category. What they did with their stores, their brick and mortar stores, trying to move online. There were so many different things happening that they were inconsistent in other ways, or they didn't deliver on the promise in which the consumers had come accustomed to expect. And so it doesn't matter that they're creative, they did take a knock in that way. So I don't think it's an either or. And I think so many different things and touch points work to actually just solidify your brand equity and brand, yeah.
Okay, so I know we weren't asked this side. One thing I learned when I was at SAB was something called fresh consistency, which I always hold so deeply whenever I think about it. And sometimes I get it wrong, right? But I always think about consistently, what does brand stand for? But how can we show up in a fresh way? Yeah. I think Nike is a great example, even with all of like the challenges they have. But I think Dove is a great example. Yeah. And by the way, even Dove, if you 5 years ago was running a good space, like they were, and I do think if I look at their creative, actually they had veered off a little bit because they weren't consistent to who they were. Yeah. Maybe the last thing I'll say, I love the Nike example on the bricks and mortar. Because again, if you go into this thinking they are digital natives, I'm shutting down all my stores. Yeah. Everyone's going to buy online. You are making a massive mistake. You look at the fastest growing bank in South Africa, unfortunately, is not us. Is Capitec, right? Capitec is growing branches. Yeah. They have, and even though digital products are growing, like, and all of that, absolutely. That's why I always say to people, it's not either or, it's and. You've got to make sure you're building strong digital products that come from strong insights that have a frictionless journey. But you also need to make sure that you're where everyone is, right? And stuff. And that's what, as marketers, do not get caught up in this trap of digital only.
I will say, because I think the question is also like, if you had to choose, right? Either or, if you had to. I think in the end, I would always gear towards the consistency because it fills everything else, right? My trust in the creative is based on the consistency of the values and stuff. So if obviously together is optimal, that's what we want. But if it was just a straight gun to head either or, consistency trumps everything else.
But I think that like the summary of what everyone said here today, if it can come down to one line, it's that there's no absolutes, right? Like you might be sitting on what looks like opposite sides of a panel, but I mean we saw earlier Kensani wanted to cross the street. and so it's more of a kind of a spectrum and like an agreement that there are no absolutes, you know, whether it's tech or no tech, purpose or no purpose, you know, fun or, you know, big values driven communication. I think it's all important. It just depends on the balance between the brands. Okay, so Andrea, I think we're kind of at the end now. Are there any other questions that we need to ask?
There's a couple. I'll just go through a couple more that have come up on the Q&A. One question for Mona Lisa actually. Is the data presented also segmented according to the social economic status of women in SA?
Yes, it is.
Do you want to give details of how they can access the...
Or you can reach out and hello@the-riverbed and we can share research with you. Okay.
Just one more question. How do corporates and men become allies for women in leadership and Gen Zs? Research shows women-led organisations in Africa outperform many leading stock exchange organisations. So what more can men do and corporates do?
And sorry, just to add, that was me. And it's not for the panel only. You know, with panel discussions, always like we sit and we're waiting for them to give us all the answers. Yeah. Anyone on the floor can take this, particularly also because there are men sitting down there. I'm asking, like, it's a genuine question.
I'm gonna pick on Kaya. Kaya.
Yeah.
What is the question?
How can men be better allies to women in Africa and in leadership?
Particularly
What? No. I ain't scared of you. I don't know how to answer this question, but I think that it's like, okay, there's a study that I read, like I believe about 2 years ago. It was very interesting. And it's also a bit unfair when I think about it, because it shows that men who become CEOs and have daughters only are more likely to get women in leadership positions in their countries. Right? So, and what's crazy is the fact that, like, why does it have to take that to see that? And so I think that, like, as men, we just got to I think maybe stop thinking that the positions and the roles are our right? And as if that is like the domain that we are supposed to own. Because I know for me, for example, I think that, like, my first few bosses were women, and not only that, my very first mentor ever, I approached her because I wanted a mentor. I got this woman to be my mentor. And so I think that as young men, as we're growing up as well, is that we need to even mix up who we choose to become our men, right? Because that will reframe our way of thinking and what we think the world should be. Because often we look at other men as role models, whereas actually I feel that a lot of the times our first role models, especially I think as young black men who grow up in a lot of single mother kind of households, is that the role models, that people that we see who are doing great things within our communities are actually women. So I think if we reframe our thinking and say that I don't just want to use men as an example, but I also want to look at women as examples. It goes, I think, to the young men that we raise, because it may be a little bit harder to kind of change those guys who already have, like, their brains kind of set, like the world and how it works. I mean, I remember being at I'm not going to say which company I was working for, but there was a pregnant woman, because she was pregnant, and it's like, we want to promote, kind of promote about all those things. And what was interesting in this session is that the person who was there, but they're pregnant, they'll be away for a while, and maybe we should promote this other person. And the person who actually made that point was a woman, right? And instead of like and the people who said, yeah, but why should they be the disadvantaged simply because they're pregnant were men in their region. So I think that these are battles that I think that both men and women have to keep fighting within the cup. So I don't have an answer.
Sorry. Yeah. Hi. Hi. I'm Kangi from Raft Creative, and actually one of the recipients of the award with WiM in terms of 2022. And this is specifically around advocacy. I think for me, Dr. Mzamo Masito is one of the pioneers in terms of men who are decision makers, speaking on behalf of women, but also listening to women, right, and their struggles, and putting it forward in spaces and forums where decisions can be made.
He has 3 daughters.
And he has 3 daughters.
Tracks. He's got 3 daughters.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I think at a grassroots level, there are things that we can do. I mean, I manage a team of account managers who intentionally advocate for women content creators as an example. And also I think it would be remiss to say this conversation only revolves around women. Anyone that is a minority group, in fact, cannot be excluded from this conversation. I mean, I talk about this specifically because we're going into October, and everyone is going to be going on about Pride and the LGBTQIA plus community, and then after that, it's finished. It goes quiet, which is why I think you haven't seen a lot of examples, because it's not really genuine, So I think it takes people who are in decision making roles to challenge the status quo and be willing to be that voice that people are at first probably going to shun on, but the voice of reason, I suppose. Because the reason why some of these things thrive for as much as they do is because no one's willing to actually take the stand and have the real conversations. So
maybe the one thing that I can say, which is a challenge back to if you are leading a team of young people, especially with Gen Zs, right? One of the things you've got to do for them is make sure that behind the plaster, behind the audacity, behind their substance. Yeah. Because I really, really struggle. I'm opening up. I have these young people in my team, and they all want to be executive heads of marketing, which I absolutely love because the audacity that they have is just inspiring because we didn't grow up like that. We didn't have that, you know? But I find that they want to be executive heads of marketing, but they don't want to be brand manager. And do the budget, man. Go to the branch and put up the banner.